Hello, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And we are just starting with our first block of the month for 2019. And we talked to you last month, but here it's back again. Here's our focus fabric for 2019. It's called Modern Movement by Henry Glass. And just a quick reminder, we're doing improvisational quilting this year. And so we are going to start you off on a pretty easy block, we think.
Yes.
So here's some samples of finished blocks. Basically, we're going to strip piece a big block, and we're going to then cut it into four.
Right.
And twist them how we want and end up with a block like this. So here's one example that I made. And that probably won't show anymore. And here's one that Shelley had made with her fabric. And here's another one that I made. They all look a little bit different depending on how you cut your fabric. So, so the one thing that we are going to tell you is in each of the blocks, when you do it, you need one 1-inch strip, 13.5 inches long, of the focus fabric. And we're trying to minimize the focus fabric. We want it to appear in each block, but we don't want it to overpower the block. And we're hoping that you can get all 12 blocks this year out of one fat quarter. So
probably even make two.
Yeah, I was able to last year make 2 of each block. So all of the strips today are going to be 13.5 inches long. And Shelley's going to talk about the sizing of these strips.
Okay, so these are the ones I've cut to do for the demonstration. And I have a 2-inch white block. And the idea is we're going to need,
I'll hold that up.
We're going to need a total of 8 strips. But 7 of them are of your choosing between the 3 colors, the gray, the white, and the complementary color. And then the 1-inch focus fabric. So the total, well, they need to range in size between 2 inches and 3.5 inches, with the minimum when you're laying them right next to each other like this, the total, not counting the focus fabric, need to be a minimum of 16 inches. That is, I'll say it again, how not sewn together.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is how I'm planning on doing it. I have no idea what this is going to look like after I put it together.
And actually, after we found after you start sewing them, keep laying them up there, Shelley. Okay. That after you start sewing them, you may not like, and you might want to rearrange, and that works out too. It's pretty open how you do it.
Right.
And it changes the look completely after we cut it up. So, we just, I know when I did mine, I laid them out 3 or 4 times, rearranged them, and then finally figured out what I wanted. So if you're going to measure the whole thing, including the focus fabric, you want 17 inches at least, because that takes into account losing all of the seam allowances.
Because you need to end up when you're done with a 13.5 inches.
So what
minimum.
Does she have here? So she has about 17 inches, I guess. Yeah.
In my part of my planning is I tried to put the one that I think is going to be in the middle, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut this way. Our first cut after these are sewn together is going to be cut this way in the middle. And my thinking is try to put one of my biggest pieces here, because it makes it so much easier, because you need to have a minimum at your seam. One of your seams here has to be
at least half an inch.
At least half an inch.
I mean, you really want a little bit more,
right,
but at least half an inch. So we are going to go sew these together, and because it's 13.5 inches, and our finished block is going to be 12.5 inches square. Right. So you have some extra on either end, but try to accurately sew these strips so they match at the ends. And we're going to come back after we've sewn roughly half of one side and half the other before we do that final middle seam, so you can see the measurements to make sure you're okay before that seam, and we actually cut it back apart. All right, so we'll be back in just a moment. All right, so we are back and we have sewn almost all the seams on the block. We've left, this center piece has not been sewn in. And so what we want to show you that because there's 2 seams left, so there's an even amount of seam allowance, we can measure across the width of the block. And as you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it from that far away, we're at about 14 3/4 inches right now. Mm. So half of that, or 7 and
a little over 7 1/2.
Yeah.
No,
between 7 1/2 and 7 1/4 is where the center is going to be, and so that falls really nicely on this block. So we could have proceeded and sewn this together, right, and not had a weird size.
Right.
But say we did have a weird size there.
Yeah.
Then
let's say we actually put it like, well, we can't do it like that, but say we had this skinnier strip in there, then it would,
and it was going to leave too little.
Yeah.
Then you could totally at this point rearrange these blocks,
right,
differently. Although we have a blue, like
okay,
this,
we could have done like this. Yeah.
And then maybe that's a better. So just feel free after you have sewn it to rearrange and make sure you're going to have at least, now we said a 1/2 inch. To be honest, you probably want at least a 3/4 inch because you're going to lose a seam there.
Yeah,
a 1/4 inch.
You want it to look appropriate, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back to, can we do it? We can. It was like this, I think. Maybe. Well, we'll double check. Anyway, but we're okay. It's in the middle. We're going to sew that center seam, and then we're going to come back and talk about the cutting of the block. We have sewn all the seams now. You can see right here we're a little bit over, that's 13 1/2, perfect, roughly.
As long as we got enough, at this point.
But there is an issue here, so Shelley.
Well, apparently on this strip I made it slightly more than 13 1/2, so I'm going to trim this edge so it's even, and actually the other edge, even though I sewed on, it should be even, but that's the thing right now, is make sure both of this edge and the bottom edge here are even before you start cutting.
Because I'm gonna go a little bit ahead at this point, but we're gonna make 2 cuts. We're gonna cut one way down the center and one way across this way, and that'll be our next step. And then after that, when we come back, I'm gonna show you on this block, we take those 4 pieces and we rotate them different directions, however you like the look. And there are some issues with that if we don't trim them kind of roughly even at this point. So we will be right back after we make the cut, and then we will go over those possible concerns.
Right.
Okay? All right, so we're back and we have cut the block into 4 pieces. Right. As you can see right here. And now comes kind of a little bit of the fun part. Hey Shelley, can you show with our 6 1/2 inch square? We did make sure that each of the pieces are at least 6 1/2 inch square. You know, that's your minimum that you would need. Okay, so we did verify all of them. And if you want to at this point, I guess you could trim them to that, and then you just do that final seam, and you're perfect.
Well, and in some ways, for some people it might be easier because then you don't have to worry about what thing you've cut down and made too small. You can, which potentially could be an issue. I'm gonna take these ones off of here right now because both of these blocks, these have a nice wide piece of fabric, but the one on this one, which we deliberately left it that way to show you, this part's very nice and wide, but this one is a little thinner. I think it's about 1 inch.
So it has plenty, but if you're going to trim this down to size, it might start getting a little bit skimpy and almost disappearing.
Yeah.
So the way to combat that is to make sure that it stays in the center. And it's just going to use the 1/4 inch seam against it, and then the rest of it will still be there. And so however you want to do it, if she wanted to do like this and this, either way, she's keeping those short edges towards the center.
Right.
And the wider part to the outside. Right. And then playing around with flipping them around and maybe seeing how possibly wants to place these blocks, which is totally up to you how you want to switch them around and
that's definitely possible.
And think what design you like. You know, I'm pretty symmetrical, so I kind of tend to do the same with one side, opposite sides as the other. But you don't have to. You could do something like this.
Yeah.
That whatever you like.
Yeah.
Just watching. If you happen to have them, you may not. You may have very wide edges like this one. But if you've got one that's a little bit, an inch or less left,
right,
you might want to watch that edge.
That is totally assuming that this is more than 6.5 to start with. If you're at 6.5, you don't even need to worry about that.
Right.
On across this way.
Okay. So we are going to, Shelley, since this is her block, she's going to pick out the layout that she likes, and we are going to sew together the two top, the two bottom, and then put them together, right. Press opposite directions on the back, and when we come back, we will have our final block.
All right.
We have sewn the block all the way together, and all right, this is our signature move. Shelley, how big is this block? Is it 12.5?
Well, it's actually bigger as well.
It's way bigger. Oh my gosh. We're perfect again. No.
Okay, the trick here now is I have these marks here. 12 inch.
Here's an issue we have with 12.5-inch square up rulers. Yeah. Is they don't show the exact center. Yeah. And for most of the time when you are squaring something up, you really need to know the center. So
especially on a 4-block, section.
Well, I don't know. I think almost every time you want that center. So Shelley has marked, this is the center.
Yeah, so that's how I square up from, is where the center is, and then lay it on there and square up from there. That way it's centered.
And the easiest way to do that is to obviously go on a diagonal off of each one,
right? And
then you're at the center, which is hard to find on a normal square up. I mean, maybe there are square ups that they make that do that better.
It would be nice, yeah.
But
this one doesn't.
Yeah, this one doesn't. Okay, so take that off, Shelley. So when we sewed this, remember how before we came. We went to sew this. We talked about protecting these two narrow ones. So actually, when you sew it, you want to sew from the center out, not from the edges in. And the other thing I'm going to show. Let's show on this one.
It's harder to show here, so we'll show it on a different one.
This is a different block that we've done, and you can clearly see that that here is, there's a white and gray corners.
When you go to sew this, actually, when you've sewn the 2 rows, you have the 2 rows, and the seam should nest, and that's how you know where the center is. That's why you'll end up with a perfect corner here in the center.
And then Shelley, when she presses it, she does that.
I press this one down, and then this one this way, and this one this way.
Right, and then you get that really nice flat thing, which we've talked about. We talk about it almost every month.
Well,
and unfortunately, I don't really have a way to zoom in the camera in our low-tech studio. but that's what we're looking for. So back to it. So here's our finished block. It's oversized, and I'll be honest, I'm going to say when you turn in your blocks for block of the month, you can leave them oversized, and that way the person who wins the blocks can cut them as they want. Because I think everyone will agree they'd rather have them a little large than a little small.
That's true. That's very true.
So as long as you have put the ruler on it and made sure you are at least at 12.5 on each edge. Yeah. So and we're glad you're joining us on this improv journey. Yeah. And
beautiful fabrics, if nothing else, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So we will see you next month.